Dear listeners, we're back with a new story. Get ready for cheating, revenge, and wild relationship drama. I remember the first time Clara mentioned Ivan. It was a Sunday afternoon, one of those rare moments when we both had the day off, and she was preparing lunch in the kitchen while I sat at the table, reading the newspaper. The usual clatter of pots and pans filled the air, but her voice had a new energy as she started talking about her day at the cafe. "There's this new customer, Ivan," she said, glancing over her shoulder at me as she chopped vegetables. He's hard to miss. Tall, charming, always knows exactly what he wants. You'd probably like him." I looked up from my paper, amused by her tone. It wasn't often that she mentioned customers by name, let alone went into detail. "Is that so? What makes him so special?" She laughed lightly, setting the knife down as she turned to face me. "Oh, come on. He's just a nice guy. Very polite, always leaves a big tip. I swear, he's like a breath of fresh air compared to some of the rude regulars I have to deal with." There was something in the way she said it, almost like she was defending herself, anticipating a reaction I hadn't even given yet. I shook off the nagging feeling and nodded. "Well, sounds like you've got yourself a favorite customer." Clara rolled her eyes and smiled, turning back to her chopping. "Oh, please. It's not like that. It's just nice to have someone appreciate the work I do." At the time, I didn't think much of it. She was proud of the cafe, and I was proud of her for running it so well. I'd heard her complain often enough about rude customers, so it made sense that she'd mention someone who wasn't a total jerk for once. Still, the way she lingered on Ivan's name, it stuck with me. I pushed the thought aside, telling myself it was nothing. A few weeks passed, and I'd almost forgotten about Ivan until he came up again. This time, we were sitting on the couch after dinner, binge-watching a TV show when Clara's phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at it, then chuckled to herself, typing a quick reply before tossing the phone on the coffee table. "What's so funny?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Oh, it's just Ivan," she said casually, without looking up at me. "He texted me about the new blend we're trying out at the cafe. He said it's the best coffee he's ever had." I felt a slight twinge in my gut. "Texted you? Since when do you text your customers?" Clara shrugged, her eyes still fixed on the TV screen. "It's no big deal. We talk about the cafe sometimes. He's kind of a coffee enthusiast, you know." The unease crept in again, but I forced a smile, trying to play it cool. "Coffee enthusiast, huh? Seems like you two are pretty close for a customer." She looked over at me, her smile soft but teasing. "Don't be silly. He's just a regular. Besides, you know I talk to everyone who comes through the cafe. It's part of the job." "Yeah, but do you give them all your number too?" She sighed, sensing where this conversation might lead. "Come on, you know it's not like that. He's harmless. Just a guy who loves his coffee." I didn't push the issue, though my mind lingered on the thought longer than I wanted it to. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overreacting. After all, Clara was outgoing, friendly with all her customers. It was part of her charm. I'd seen it for years and never felt insecure about it before. But Ivan seemed different. A few days later, she brought him up again. This time, we were having dinner at home. Clara had just come back from a long day at the cafe, and she seemed more animated than usual. "Ivan came by again today," she said, her eyes lighting up as she took a sip of wine. "He stayed for almost an hour. We talked about music, travel, you know, he's been to over 30 countries. I can't even imagine." "That's impressive," I replied, forcing a smile, though my stomach churned at how excited she seemed. "You must have had quite the conversation." "We did," she continued, oblivious to my discomfort. "It's funny, I don't usually get to talk like that with customers. But Ivan, he just has this way of making you feel like you're the only person in the room, you know." I set my fork down, my appetite suddenly gone. "Sounds like you really admire him." Clara paused, catching the edge in my tone. She blinked, as if realizing for the first time that I might not be as thrilled about this Ivan character as she was. I mean, yeah, he's interesting. But you don't have to worry. It's not like that, isn't it? I asked, my voice quieter now, but firm. Because it sure sounds like you're getting pretty attached to him. She frowned, her shoulders stiffening. You're reading too much into it. He's just a customer. Customers don't usually text their baristas after hours, Clara. Or bring them flowers. She scoffed, leaning back in her chair, her frustration rising. Oh, come on. The flowers were just a nice gesture. You're making this into something it's not. But I could see it in her eyes. The excitement she got from talking about Ivan wasn't just casual. It was something more, something I wasn't sure she was even aware of yet. The way she lit up when she spoke about him, how she seemed more alive when he was the topic of conversation, it wasn't nothing. It wasn't just in my head. I'm not accusing you of anything, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though the bitterness was hard to hide. But I'm telling you, this doesn't feel right. Clara sighed deeply, running her fingers through her hair. You're being paranoid. He's just a customer, and I'm allowed to have conversations with people. Can we drop it? I stared at her for a long moment before nodding. Yeah, sure. Let's drop it. But deep down, I knew we weren't done. Not by a long shot. The days that followed felt like slow-motion disasters, one after the other. Clara's mentions of Ivan became so routine that it seemed like he was part of our lives, an invisible third party in the room. His name would slip into conversation so effortlessly, as if it was natural for him to occupy that space between us. She'd come home from the cafe with this brightness in her eyes, a glow I hadn't seen in a long time, but it wasn't for me. No matter how many times I tried to dismiss it, I knew she was thinking of him. It was the small things that gave her away, the way she'd smile at her phone after receiving a message, the way her tone would lift when she talked about her day at work, but only when it involved Ivan. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, the TV playing quietly in the background, I couldn't help but notice her distraction. She was curled up with her phone, her fingers tapping away quickly on the screen, her lips curled into a slight smile. Who are you texting? I asked, trying to sound casual, though the knot in my stomach tightened. She didn't look up right away, just kept typing, her smile not fading. Oh, it's Ivan, she said, her voice light and carefree, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Ivan again, huh? I tried to keep my tone even, but I knew there was a sharpness to it. Clara glanced up at me, her brows furrowed. Don't start, please. It's just about the cafe. He's been coming in more often lately, and we've been talking about some ideas for the menu. He's really into coffee, you know. Yeah, I get that. But do you really need to talk about the cafe after hours? I asked, my irritation barely masked now. I mean, when did it become normal for you to text your customers so much? Clara sighed, putting her phone down on the coffee table, as if to show she was done with the conversation. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Ivan's just a friend, okay? You know I talk to everyone. You're acting like I'm sneaking around or something. I stared at her for a moment, feeling the weight of her words. Am I? I mean, it's more than just a text here and there. You light up when you talk about him. You get this, look. And I haven't seen you look at me like that in a long time. Her face softened slightly, but there was still a defensive edge to her voice. You're imagining things. It's not like that. I'm allowed to have conversations with people, you know. He's just a guy who comes into the cafe. Why are you making this such a big deal? I leaned back, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. It's not just that. It's the flowers, the constant texting. It feels like he's more than just a customer to you. Clara threw her hands up in frustration, standing up from the couch. I can't believe this. You're seriously making me out to be some kind of cheater because a customer brought me flowers? They were birthday flowers, for God's sake. There's nothing going on, and you need to stop seeing things that aren't there. She turned away, walking into the kitchen to put some distance between us, leaving me sitting there in a boiling mix of anger and confusion. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to accept that I was overreacting, that my suspicions were just the product of my own insecurities. But the way she was so quick to defend him, to dismiss my concerns, it didn't sit right. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Clara's behavior only reinforced my doubts. She became more secretive, more guarded. She'd step out of the room to take phone calls, telling me they were work-related, though she never used to do that before. And when she was home, she was glued to her phone more often than not, laughing at messages I couldn't see. One night, as I sat at the kitchen table alone, Clara was upstairs, supposedly taking a bath. I stared at her phone, which she'd left on the counter. It was unlocked. For a few moments, I hesitated, knowing how much I hated the idea of invading her privacy. But the gnawing suspicion in my gut won out, and I grabbed the phone. I scrolled through her messages, my heart pounding harder with each one I read. The conversations with Ivan weren't just casual or work-related. They were flirtatious, intimate in a way that made my stomach churn. One message stood out, a knife to the heart. "There's something about the way we connect, it's exciting, isn't it? I haven't felt like this in a long time." I could barely breathe as I stared at the words. Clara was sharing things with Ivan that she hadn't shared with me in years. She wasn't just infatuated with him, she was emotionally invested, drawn into some twisted fantasy that excluded me entirely. Just as I was about to put the phone down, I heard Clara's voice from the doorway. "What are you doing?" I froze, the phone still in my hand. Slowly, I looked up to see her standing there, her arms crossed, her face pale. "You're checking my phone now? Are you serious?" I stood up, the anger boiling over. "What the hell is this, Clara? You said it was nothing, that it was just friendly. But I'm reading these messages, and it doesn't look so innocent to me." "Exciting? Really? What the hell is exciting about talking to some guy at your cafe behind my back?" She stared at me, her face twisting between anger and guilt. "It's not what you think. We were just talking. It's emotional, okay? But it's not like I cheated on you. I haven't done anything physical. That doesn't make it any better." I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. "You've been pouring your heart out to another man. That's cheating, Clara. Maybe not physically, but you've crossed a line, and you know it." She didn't respond, her eyes cast down toward the floor. For a long moment, we stood there in silence, the weight of what I had discovered hanging between us like a suffocating fog. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get like this." I shook my head, my chest tight with a mix of betrayal and frustration. "It doesn't matter what you meant. It's already happened." Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't find it in myself to feel sorry for her. Not anymore. All I could feel was the slow, crushing weight of betrayal. "You've been lying to me," I said quietly. "And I don't know if I can come back from this." Clara's tears spilled over as she shook her head, trying to speak, but I didn't want to hear it. Whatever she had to say wouldn't change the fact that something had broken between us, and I wasn't sure it could be fixed. The night after I found the messages, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of Clara and Ivan, of the intimacy they shared that had been denied to me for so long. I kept replaying their messages in my head, wondering how it had started, where I had gone wrong, and whether this emotional affair had already crossed into something physical. Clara barely spoke to me the next morning. Her eyes were puffy from crying, her movements slow, as if she were carrying the weight of her guilt. She offered no further explanations, no attempts at apology. Instead, there was a heavy silence that hung over the house like a dark cloud, making it hard to breathe. I went to work, but my mind was miles away, consumed by everything I had uncovered. I didn't know how to confront her again, how to ask the right questions without losing control of my emotions. But I knew I had to know the full truth. I couldn't live in the half-light of suspicion anymore. When I got home that evening, Clara was sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window. A mug of untouched coffee sat in front of her, growing cold. She didn't look up when I walked in. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her, trying to understand how we had gotten here. Finally, I broke the silence. "We need to talk." She flinched slightly at my voice but didn't turn to face me. "I know," she said softly, her voice strained and tired. I took a deep breath and sat down across from her. "I need the truth, Clara. All of it. No more lies, no more half-answers. What's really been going on between you and Ivan?" She was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "It started so innocently. He was just a customer, someone I talked to during my shifts. But then, I don't know. We started texting, and it became more than that. I liked the attention. I liked how he made me feel." My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "What do you mean, more than that? How far has this gone?" Clara looked at me then, her eyes filled with guilt and shame. "We never slept together. I swear, we didn't. But I won't lie to you, I thought about it. I thought about him a lot. More than I should have. And the texts, the messages. I know they crossed a line." "More than a line, Clara," I said, my voice breaking. "You betrayed me. It doesn't matter if it wasn't physical. You were with him in every other way that counts." She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. She paused, searching for the words. "I've been feeling lost for a long time. I don't know how to explain it, but things between us, they've felt off. I didn't feel like myself anymore, and when Ivan started showing me attention, I felt seen again. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't feel like yourself." I echoed, my anger flaring. "What about me? Do you think I haven't noticed the distance between us? Do you think I haven't felt like I was losing you? But instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix it, you ran to someone else. You let him take my place." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her voice shaky. I know. I should have talked to you. I should have. You should have been honest," I interrupted, my voice harsh. "Instead, you've been sneaking around, lying to my face, and pretending that everything was fine." Clara winced, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I don't know what to say. I messed up. I know that." There was a long, painful silence between us. I wanted to scream, to demand answers that would somehow make sense of all of this. But there were no answers that could fix what had been broken. The truth was out now, and it was worse than I'd feared. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know if I can forgive this, Clara." Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "Please, don't say that. We can work through this." "I know we can." I shook my head. "I don't think you understand how deep this cuts. You've been living in a fantasy with another man, while I've been here, trying to hold on to something that clearly doesn't matter to you anymore." "That's not true," she cried, her voice rising. "I still love you. I never stopped loving you. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this," I said quietly, the bitterness in my chest almost too much to bear. "You don't hurt the people you love like this." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands, her body shaking. I watched her, feeling a strange mixture of anger, sadness, and pity. A part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort her like I used to, but I couldn't. Not now. Not after everything. When her sobs finally subsided, I stood up. "I need space. I need to figure out what happens next." Clara looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't know if we can fix this," I said, my voice hollow. "It means I need time to think." She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, stopping her. "Don't. I'm not making any promises. Right now, I just need to get out of here. I turned and left the kitchen, grabbing my keys off the counter. As I walked out the door, I heard Clara call after me, her voice pleading. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I got into my car and drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring together as I tried to make sense of what I was feeling. I had loved Clara for so long, but now, all I could see was her betrayal, her connection to another man. How had we gotten here? How had we gone from being a team, a partnership, to this? The truth was, I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. When I finally returned home, it was late. The house was dark, and Clara had gone to bed. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her sleep, wondering if we had any chance left. The next morning, I would make the hardest decision of my life. But for now, in the stillness of the night, I let myself imagine a future where none of this had happened. Where Ivan was just a stranger, and Clara was still the woman I had fallen in love with. But I knew, deep down, that the truth had changed everything. And there was no going back. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart heavy with the weight of the previous night's revelations. Clara was still asleep beside me, her face peaceful, unaware of the turmoil swirling within me. I knew I had to confront the reality of our situation, but I didn't want to wake her. Eventually, the silence became unbearable. I slipped out of bed, moving quietly to the kitchen. I brewed coffee, the familiar scent filling the air and grounding me in an uncomfortable reality. My thoughts raced as I replayed Clara's tears, her pleas for forgiveness. But could I truly forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? As I poured myself a cup, I heard footsteps behind me. Clara appeared in the doorway, her hair tousled and her eyes still heavy with sleep. "Morning," she said softly, rubbing her eyes. "Morning," I replied, my voice flat. She stepped closer, hesitating as if unsure of how to approach me. "I'm really sorry about last night," she said, her voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you." I took a deep breath, setting the coffee cup down on the counter. "I don't know how we can move forward, Clara. It feels like everything has changed." "I know," she said, her eyes filling with tears again. "But we can work through this. I want to fix it. I love you, do you really?" I challenged, crossing my arms. "Because it feels like you were willing to throw our life away for some excitement with him." Clara's face fell, and she looked down at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. "I know I made a huge mistake. I was lost. I didn't know how to talk to you about how I was feeling." "You didn't talk to me at all," I countered, frustration rising. "You chose to confide in him instead of your husband. That says a lot." "I know. I realize that now," she pleaded. "But can't we try to move past this? I'm willing to do anything to prove to you that I can be better." I took a step back, shaking my head. "How can I believe that? It's going to take more than just words." Clara took a deep breath, her face contorting with emotion. "I understand if you need time. Just, please don't give up on us yet." "I need time to think," I said finally, my heart aching. "I don't want to make any rash decisions. But right now, I can't pretend like everything is okay." As I walked away from her, I felt a hollow ache in my chest. I had no idea how to rebuild what we once had. The air between us was thick with unspoken words and broken trust, and I needed distance to process everything. Days turned into weeks, and the atmosphere in our home became increasingly tense. I moved through the motions of daily life, work, chores, and brief, awkward conversations with Clara. She tried to reach out, often bringing up the idea of therapy or couples counseling, but I wasn't ready for that yet. Each time I looked at her, all I could see was the betrayal that had shattered my world. One evening, Clara sat down next to me on the couch, her expression earnest. "Can we talk?" I looked up from my phone, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "About what?" "I know things have been rough, and I can't change what I did," she began, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. But I really want to make this work. I miss us. I miss you, do you? I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. Because it doesn't seem like you were missing me when you were texting Ivan. Please, don't bring him up again, she said, frustration seeping into her voice. I messed up. I've apologized. I just want a chance to show you that I can be better. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger that threatened to spill over. You say that, but I feel like I'm the only one suffering here. You're the one who gets to keep your job, your friends. I'm the one left to deal with the fallout. Clara leaned closer, desperation in her eyes. I know, and it kills me that I hurt you. But I don't want to lose you. I can't imagine my life without you. Maybe that's the problem, I replied, my voice low. Maybe you need to understand what you stand to lose. Her eyes glistened with tears. I promise I'll do better. I'll show you how much you mean to me. Just give me a chance. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. I don't know if I can. Not right now. I need to think. Days passed without resolution. I busied myself with work, throwing myself into projects to distract from the chaos at home. I'd get calls and texts from friends who sensed something was wrong, and I'd brush them off, unwilling to share the truth of my situation. I didn't want their pity or their advice. One afternoon, I stepped into a coffee shop, the familiar scent of brewed coffee hitting me as I entered. As I stood in line, I caught a glimpse of a man sitting alone at a table by the window, Ivan. He was engrossed in his phone, his dark hair falling just right over his forehead, the charm that had clearly captivated Clara radiating from him. My heart raced with anger and a deep sense of betrayal. I couldn't help but feel a surge of protectiveness for what was mine. This man had invaded my life, had taken my wife's affection, and here he was, blissfully unaware of the damage he had caused. I stepped out of line, my hands trembling as I contemplated my next move. Should I confront him? Should I make a scene? Part of me yearned to unleash my fury, to let him know that I was aware of the emotional affair and that I would not stand for it. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw Clara's name flash across the screen. My heart sank. I didn't want to deal with this right now. I decided against confronting Ivan today. Instead, I took a deep breath and stepped outside, vowing that this wasn't over. I would not let him steal my peace. I needed to show Clara that her choices had consequences. When I returned home that evening, I found Clara sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes scanning a book but clearly lost in thought. She looked up as I entered, her expression shifting from hope to uncertainty. Hey, she said softly. How was your day? I shrugged, keeping my responses brief. Fine, just fine, she pressed, her tone turning anxious. Did you get any work done? Some, I replied, moving to the fridge to pour myself a drink. I could feel her eyes on me, the weight of her expectations hanging in the air. I was thinking, she began, hesitating. Maybe we could plan a weekend getaway. Just the two of us. It might help us reconnect. I turned to face her, my heart racing. You think a weekend away is going to fix things? You think that running away from our problems will magically make everything better? Clara opened her mouth to respond, but I continued, my voice rising. You need to understand that this isn't going to go away just because we go on a trip. I don't want to play pretend. She stood up, frustration bubbling over. I'm trying to do something here. I want to fight for us, but what about your fight with Ivan? I countered, the bitterness slipping out. You're still caught up in that emotional affair, and I'm not sure you can see how damaging it is to our relationship. That's not fair. Clara shot back, her face flushed with anger. I made a mistake. I'm trying to fix it. I'm willing to put in the effort, are you? I paused, the tension in the room thickening. Effort isn't enough when trust has been shattered. I need time to process everything, Clara. And right now, I don't even know what I want. She stepped back, her hands trembling at her sides. what does that mean for us? Are you saying you're done? I don't know, I replied, my voice heavy with uncertainty. But if I'm honest, I feel like I'm losing you, and I don't know how to get you back. With those words, the walls we'd both been trying to hold up finally came crashing down. Clara sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. I wanted to comfort her, but I felt just as lost. All we had now were shattered pieces of what had once been a strong foundation, and I feared that no amount of glue could hold them together again. In that moment, it became painfully clear, the aftermath of her betrayal would leave scars, and healing would take more than just time. It would require honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to face our demons together, or apart. And right now, I wasn't sure we could do either.